Thank you. Give us a few moments as we set the stage for the next session. Before that, as you're all aware, every year MMA celebrates the International Women's Day by organizing the MMA Women Managers Convention. This year, the Women Managers Convention is on the theme Mindsets Matter on Saturday, 17th of March at this very venue, Taj Coromandel. And as a prelude to the Women Managers Convention, a competition for Outstanding Woman Manager for the year 2018 is conducted. This year, the competition is on the theme of the Women Manager Convention, Mindsets Matter, and the competition will be held on Friday, 9th of March at MMA office, Tenampet. So those women managers who are interested can get in touch with the MMA Secretariat. Also, as mentioned earlier, there's a feedback form given to all of you. We request you to kindly fill up the feedback form and hand it over to the MMA officials after the convention is over. MMA is very active in social media. We have a Facebook page, MMA Chennai, and MMA_4U, which is the Twitter account. Please log in and like the postings. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the stage is set for the next session. Skills to learn and grow. How can people lead the way? It is my privilege now to invite on stage the chairman of the session, Mr. Ramesh KB Menon, Director, HR, and Lead Director, Diversified Business Group, Murugappa Group. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of the session, Mr. Ramesh Menon, with a round of applause. I now invite our distinguished speakers, Padma Shri Syed Kirmani, former Indian cricketer, and Yogi Shri Sudarshan Kannan, renewed philosopher, spiritual master, and management exponent. Mr. Ramesh Menon leads the people function at Murugappa Group. As Director HR, he spearheads the group's efforts towards being the employer of choice and creating a multidimensional and collaborative workforce. In this capacity, he serves as the Executive Director on the Murugappa Corporate Board. Mr. Ramesh will chair the session. We have with us Mr. Syed Kirmani, popularly known as Kiri. Till date, Mr. Kirmani is counted as one of the most effective wicketkeeper batsmen that the world has seen. His splendid performance during the 1983 World Cup His splendid performance during the 1983 World Cup earned him the Best Wicketkeeper Award of the 1983 World Cup. Besides many other awards, Mr. Kirmani was awarded the Padma Shri in 1982 for his contribution to Indian cricket. And Arjuna Award also. Can we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? And finally, we are all blessed and privileged to have the dynamic presence of the spiritual master, the world-famous speaker and corporate guru, Yogi Shri Sudarshan Kannan. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I hand over the session to the chairman, Mr. Ramesh Menon. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. So first of all, thanks MMA for inviting me to chair the session. I'll quickly get onto the topic so that we have enough time for questions. Let me just put the topic in context, first of all, and the way we see it. Why is skilling up to learn important and grow today? Why is it important? And I think the answer lies somewhere in the fact that in the past, we learnt in schools and colleges and classrooms. And then we said the rest of the learning would come experiential learning, which would be through the years of experience that we would get. However, things have changed. We live in a very disruptive environment. We live in a VUCA environment, and an environment where technology is playing a greater role, and people probably will play a lesser role. So how do we cope with this? How is it that, earlier your years of experience counted, and then therefore you could do several jobs, but today suddenly something that you knew so long means nothing. And sometimes it's technology, sometimes it's a disruption, or sometimes it's in policy. I was at a meeting yesterday, and one of them was telling me of an example of how policy changes or puts people out of a job. A classic case, in the telecom industry, there was a verification process which was done. And earlier, you had a person call at your house, and he would do the verification. He would come and check your documents, he would do the verification. And he was supposed to sign off. And the rule was that only a company employee can sign off. Now, with the coming of biometric, that telephone company, this is a mobile company, and only one of the companies, I'm not mentioning the name, they have had to let go of 12,500 people. All permanent. So just overnight, a change in policy has sent people redundant. So there is a need to reskill, and gone are the days where most of us had one career. Earlier people never changed jobs, now people change 5 to 6 jobs. There will be a time where now people will change 5 to 6 or maybe even 20 careers during their lifetime. Technology also has sort of changed the way we do things. I mean, for example, a very simple personal thing, most of us can't remember telephone numbers today. We keep looking at our phone if you want to know somebody's telephone number. Similarly, they say Google is now working on a glass which will match the face with the number. And so you'll probably, in future, when you look at somebody's face, you want to know his number or name, it'll tell you. You won't even have to remember that. In organizations, how is it changing? And in organizations like ours, and I work for the Murugappa Group, and let me tell you how things have changed. So one is in the area of learning. So what was earlier, in terms of years of experience and moving him around through several jobs has changed. Today we use things like gaming, we use simulators. It's also prevents collateral damage today. We need to scale up people in our fertilizer business. Earlier, if you wouldn't put him in charge of a process business which could cause huge problems. Today, we are able to do that because we can create any place or any disaster on the system and see how the individual handles it. Similarly, when we look at recruitment, earlier we used to recruit for experience. We used to see how people had done in the jobs, what is the kind of exposures that you have. Today we look for something else. Today we look at his ability to deal with data, his ability to deal with chaos, his inquisitiveness to learn, his resilience, and his ability to deal with multiple things. So things have changed. And the good thing is, of course, that earlier it was said, studies by the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget thought that the brain reached, soon after adolescent, it reached a stage of final operation stage, which means that it stopped learning. It was about around that stage. But studies on brain plasticity subsequently have proven that the brain is capable of much more and continue to learn. So it is about how do we start adapting in this very different environment. And interestingly enough, I don't know, most of you must be aware that one of the tests for college students to get in abroad is the SAT. And now they are saying that the SAT will be replaced by what's called an AEI. And the AEI here is adaptability coefficient for the A, E is an emotional coefficient, and I is the intelligence coefficient. Earlier, people thought that if you had a good IQ, that's it. And then people like Goldman came out and said, no, EQ is equally important for leadership. And that's where all these behavioral theories and tests, and we said that's all important, and organizations started adopting these kind of things. It's not only organizations who need to adapt in this changing environment. It's also, it's not only people, it's organizations also. The S&P 500 index, and there is a company called InnoSight which does studies company on the S&P 500 index. And in 1965, the average life of a company on the index was 33 years, 1965. By 1990, this had dropped to 20 years. In 2012, it's 18, and by 2026, the prediction is it's going to go to 14. So companies too, unless they change, adapt, will not survive. So the companies have to constantly reskill. We know the story of Kodak, but there are also stories of success like IBM, which is one of the only 12% companies that have sort of survived these 3 years. IBM is one of them. IBM started off with basic tablet kind of stuff, not the kind of tablets that we have, but basic tablets. Then they moved on to typewriter, then they moved on to mainframe computers, then PCs, and now they have consulting. And IBM says that they are not a hardware or software company, but they sell innovations. They are in the business of selling innovations. So the challenge for people and companies and everything else is, one, how do we skill up fast? Because you don't have the luxury of time. Today, the World Bank says 60% of the jobs will be automated in the next 10 years. But the good news they say is that 50% of the jobs which will exist in the next few years have not been invented. And as you see around when we talk about data analytics and AI and all other things, these were not around 5 years or 6 years back, or they were at a very, very small scale. Today, things have changed. So we don't have the luxury of time, and therefore, learning, you need to have an accelerated learning. And how does one do an accelerated learning? Is it a skill? Is it a competency? Is it a capability? Let's hear about what we can learn from other sports and in life and philosophy as to how is there a quick way to do these kind of things? How do we sort of survive in this environment with uncertainty, and how do we get the mind comfortable with chaos? Because the mind is a certainty driver and the mind likes certainty. But how does one become comfortable with chaos, and how does one learn skills quickly? How does one grow? I'll start with Syed. Syed, what are your views on what we can learn from cricket on learning and growing? Not behind the wickets for once.
Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon, or should I say a very good evening. A very difficult session after lunch. As in, normally we have the luxury, I suppose everyone has that little bit of luxury after lunch to have a power nap, which rejuvenates really. And if I may take 5 minutes of yours, all of you, if I may request you to sit nice and straight, leaning your back onto the chairs, just close your eyes for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. I'm going to count 5 minutes. And then when I say open, and then you'll see the freshness in your cells. This is what used to happen in our school days. After lunch, the teacher who comes after lunch, apparently he or she, the teacher, likes to go for a power nap, So with that excuse, she used to put all the boys in the classroom, go to sleep. Put your heads on your table, on your bench in front, and go to sleep for 5-10 minutes. She also goes to sleep, or the teacher also goes to sleep. So on those basis, I would request you all, just for 5 minutes, just close your eyes and very comfortably, nice and straight. Start. Well, I got the signal, 5 minutes are over. Please open your eyes and see how nicely, you feel fresh, don't you? Otherwise, while the speakers were going on and the previous speakers, I could When I turned around, I could see a few yawning away, you know. Nevertheless, now, I don't know where I should start with, but at the same time, you all have heard the most distinguished speakers, right, holding very high-profile positions in their respective disciplines of businesses. And I am the most incompetent to be on stage alongside with them. And I deem it an honor to have been invited, and it's all due to Mr. Shivakumar, who's seated there, the chairman of the Prabha Associate Group. And I would like to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity alongside the MMA Annual Convention of 2018. Now, we all don't know how these high-profile speakers with the designations of MDs, chairmen, CEOs, how they reach the top is what is very, very important. You know, the kind of struggle they would have gone through, the ups and downs in their lives to reach the top, and I'm sure they would have definitely worked on the 3 alphabets, the 3 Ds, and many more alphabets to follow probably. That is determination, dedication, and discipline. I would put discipline ahead of the 2 because discipline is what builds one's character. But let me tell you, first of all, it's not first of all, by the way, I have started already. I was born in Chennai. My childhood was in Hyderabad and the rest in Bangalore. There was a very hard climb. I must tell you about myself, how I am here on stage. It's a huge honor bestowed upon me. And there has been a big grind, a lot of ups and downs in my entire career so far. But I have always been an optimistic guy, without anybody telling me what the meaning was, optimism was. In my days, in my school days, there were no guides. There was just a PT master with his whistle in his mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, that was it. And nobody to tell us what talent we guys had in our time. My father was very discouraging because he was a government employee and he wanted me to get a degree and get a government job, which he went on grilling into my head. And that's the reason maybe I must have lost my hair very quickly. You know? So on those basis, to cut it very short, because there is a limited time for all the speakers. I'm no speaker, by the way. I just share my experiences to how I went through my entire cricketing career. Cricket has been my way of life. My father could not afford canvas shoes. He was a 3rd division stenographer in the government of Mysore state then. He was transferred from Hyderabad, and that's how we came into Bangalore as school kids. Right from there on the sly, I used to take part into the sporting activities in the school, not realizing where I'm heading. There was nobody to tell me what talent I had. There was nobody to guide me, कि भाई, you have this kind of a talent or that kind of a talent where you can climb up the ladder of success. Nevertheless, so on those bases, I used to take part in my sporting activities. I was an athlete to start with. I ran 100 meters, 200s, and relay for my school team at the state school level. And then hockey, football, and cricket. All these games I played in a group team, and I excelled in all the sporting activities which I took part in, not realizing where my talent was. One fine day, the junior school tournament took off in cricket. I went and picked up the gloves. I looked into the kit bag. But before that, as a junior, as a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, where new extensions were getting developed in Karnataka. In the new Gem Hall extension, which was formed, all the government quarters were there. So on those basis, a senior guy from the C quarters, the bigger houses, called Uday Shetty. He's a psychologist now. He is based in Mangalore, placed in Mangalore. He formed a team, and being a junior, normally the seniors throw their weight on the juniors. So I was the junior most in that team of Jai Mahal. And we had 3 sticks, a big stone at the bowling end, and they were looking out for a wicket keeper. So I was being the youngest, hey, go and stand behind, stop the ball. That was the cork ball. So how do I stop the cork ball? So I looked around left and right, saw a heap of bricks. So brick was my first glove. And when I went into the school junior team, I looked into the kit bag of the school team and I found wicket-keeping gloves. They looked definitely better than the bricks. So that's where my wicket-keeping started. Nevertheless, to cut the story short again, that's how I was showing my consistency, which is the key to all businesses. You have to show your consistency to come into limelight, to come into recognition with total dedication, passion for what you want to do, and take your organization, yourself, into the next level and levels onwards. That's the way I was looking at it without anybody telling me what the goals are, what the ambitions are, and what you should become, etc. and etc. This is what I'm expressing before you all to what I have observed. And observing is another key which makes you learn a lot of things. Within your group itself, you have so many things to learn when you observe one another. And this was a little bit of a gift of the Almighty to me, which touring around right from my younger days, I went around observing people, my friends, wherever I toured throughout the world, which I went around, picked up the good qualities from good people, finding out their good qualities, that is more important. And one of the speakers, I can't remember who it was, he said one should learn to know oneself first, to take care of oneself first. And if you can take care of yourself first, you can take care of anybody else. And that's how you got to go about there are so many salesmen out here, marketing people from different disciplines of businesses. And this is what exactly, I think I have got few 10 points, PowerPoints, which if you could display those 10 points, please, for you to note it down. And you're all matured enough, experienced enough. I don't have to elaborate on those 10 PowerPoints, which are very, very essential and which are very useful for you to do your businesses. And they're the very, very vital points. Well, those points, when you can see and note it down if you wish to, and I'm sure you all have those qualities in you all. It might be a repetition from my side to whatever little knowledge and whatever I acquire. It has been a big education to me listening to these very distinguished speakers from different disciplines. And this is where I pick up a few points here and there and try to reach it across to the school kids and the college kids as and when I'm invited. So on those grounds, I suppose there have been some lovely quotes which And I must tell you at this juncture, the highlight of this entire MMA annual convention 2018, according to me, I might differ, that Dr. Arvind Srinivasan's mother was present here and she was brought onto the stage. What an honor for a mother and the son. I think you all should put your hands together to the mothers of all. I think we are all blessed and fortunate to have been into this world, hale and hearty, first by the Almighty Lord and by our parents who brought us into this world, and we are indebted to our mothers and parents. And at this juncture, I am reminded of one wonderful incident, which I am going to express it very quickly. As a startup software company CEO invited me to address to his employers in Bangalore. And when on his way, he picked me up. And on the way, I asked him, how did you start this software company of yours? He said, there's a story to that. And he was in a very huge software company. I wouldn't like to mention that big company. And he was taking his MD and CEO and the owner of the software company on a meeting on the way. So on the way, the MD asked him to stop the car. He stopped the car and he told this colleague of his, okay, I'm just visiting this home for the aged and I'll return. He was wondering why he is visiting the home for the aged. And when he came back after visiting the home for the aged, he asked, who did you visit? The MD and the CEO, who had a palatial house and the servants every nook and corner in his house, he said, I went and visited my father. That was a shock to me as well when he said this. And immediately, he told his MD and the CEO or the owner of the software company, he pulled out from his attaché in the car, wrote a resignation letter, and asked his owner of the big software company to get out of the car. And he resigned and he started that small startup software company. I mean, this is the respect which he had for his parents. You know, when they get old, they put them into the home for the aged, which is disrespecting the parents. I say this was a great learner for me, and of course, I always tend to relate this kind of an incident. But let me take you on to the lighter side of things now. Coming on to the cricketing field, I must tell you, during the 1983 World Cup finals, one lovely incident of Balwinder Singh Sandhu. Sandhu, he was the last man coming in. I was there at the crease. And we had this last wicket partnership of the first ball when, I won't go into the details, right? Malcolm Marshall, late, poor guy, he passed away very quickly due to whatever might have happened to him. He was the quickest fast bowler in the world. And the first ball, which in our time, there were no support staff at all, no coach, no doctor, no physio. No proper equipment, right? We had a very poor quality of helmet at that time. It had just started, you know. So Ballu in his turban, on his turban, had his helmet on and with the plastic sides to cover the temples. So the first ball which he faced was a bouncer, last wicket, and Ballu is not a batsman. He calls himself an all-rounder anyway, nevertheless. So on those bases, the first ball was a bouncer. Before he could do anything, it hit his helmet. And obviously he was seeing stars during daytime, you know, he was wondering what's going on. And he was rubbing his helmet. I went across to him, I said, hello, you're rubbing your helmet. Oh, okay. He removed his helmet and he started rubbing. In the meantime, Malcolm Marshall was fired with four-letter words by our time. The best umpire was Dickie Bird from England. He literally tore him apart with four-letter words to Malcolm Marshall. I wouldn't like to repeat that right now. And he said, go and apologize to him. So Malcolm Marshall, in his typical, the West Indian style of walking, they are very rhythmic, They, hey, how are you doing, man? All right, okay. That kind of a walk they have all the time. So nevertheless, he came and said, hey, man, I didn't mean to, hit you, I'm sorry about that. And the humor of Balwinder Singh Sandhu at that time was, he said sorry and walked back, and he called him back. Hey, come here, Malcolm, he said. He came back. You think my brain is here? My brain is here, man, he said. So that's the lighter side of thing. And of course, one other lovely incident was the very first wicket which Balu took. He broke the first partnership of the mighty West Indians, and got in Greenwich, very first over of his. He got in Greenwich ball, a beautiful in-swinger, coming in from outside the off stump, knocking the off stump of Gordon Greenwich, who just badly judged that delivery of his. And we were all excited about the first wicket falling with just about 10 runs on board. So we all went and said, well done, Balu, kya baat hai, you gave us the first wicket, this and that, blah, 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 blah. Tapped him on his back, some tapping him on his turban, etc. and etc. What a lovely in-swinger, Balu, we told him. He said, hey, that was not an in-swinger, that was an out-swinger which I bowled, which went inside and got his wicket. So nevertheless, whether in-swinger, out-swinger, we got a wicket, man, that is what is more important. So important is the result. Technique is not required. And the bottom line is, whatever we do, we have to produce good results. There are results, all right, but good results for you to take your companies, for you to take your businesses right on top. So, well, I think that's all I have to say for the time being. I've got some questions to be asked, I suppose, by Mr. Menon. Normally, I have been stumping players on the field. Now it's time for Mr. Menon to stump me off the field.
No, we'll have the audience stump you.
You can go ahead and you can ask the questions which you have also.
So we'll
go ahead.
Yogeshri speak, and then we'll come back to you, sir. We'll let the Yogeshri speak, and
you
then
want to ask me? Yes.
Yeah,
Now,
we'll come back to
of course, with these few expressions of mine, it's another one lovely quote which I came across in my playing days in a hospital in Cuttack. Right? It said, at the entry of the hospital, I had to take one player into the hospital when he had complained of pain in his chest. I won't go into the details of it, but the quote was so impressive. It got engraved into my head, and it said, a little bit of common sense, a little bit of tolerance, and a little bit of good humor, see what good life you lead. These three words have such great depth into it. Common sense, which is so uncommon, and tolerance. Every second we have to use that word tolerance. We have to tolerate so many things, like you all are tolerating about what I'm talking about, right? So every second you have to be very tolerant and using common senses. So, and a little bit of good humor. That is what is very, very important. Well, I take this opportunity in thanking the Madras Management Association, the chairman, the members of the association, and of course, it's all due to Mr. Shiv Kumar that I have been given the honor to be amidst you all on this wonderful and very educative annual MMA annual convention of 2018, and believe me, it has been a great learning process for me. Hearing those very distinguished speakers of today. With these, I take this opportunity in wishing all those businessmen who are all those gentlemen and ladies who are here from various disciplines of businesses, the very best of luck. Important is you got to be passionate about what you are doing, and you got to take it to the next level and be very dedicated and determined, and let not all those hassles and ups and downs. It's very important that when you are under pressure, don't get under pressure. Don't panic.
So sorry to interrupt you, but I think we're running short of time.
Yes.
I will request you to please.
Right.
Right. It's over up, so we'll need to now.
Done.
The next batsman in.
You have taken my bails off, so I have to walk back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to invite Yogeshri to give his view on the subject. Thank you, Mr. Syed. Your views are very interesting. Clearly, it's not circumstances which determine where you are, and it's determination, discipline, hard work, passion, and you really illustrated that very well. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Before I start, I want to know how much time we have, because that's very important. 20 minutes, okay. So very good evening to all of you. We'll straight away get into the topic because time is very limited. It's not audible? Is it audible now? So I have to shout it, okay. So we'll straight away get into the topic because time is very limited. How to lead the way. This is what you've all come here for, especially this session. Now, what I'm going to give you is something totally different. It's not the usual leadership seminars which they take and all that. I have specialized in the ancient